how language brought hearts closer. I was born with a congenital heart condition, and for as long as I could remember, my life revolved around hospitals, treatments, and the constant hope for a cure. Years of surgeries and medications had taken their toll on me, both physically and emotionally. But I never gave up hope. That's why, when a renowned doctor in England agreed to operate on me, I didn't hesitate. I boarded a plane, leaving behind everything familiar, and headed to a country where I didn't even speak the language. The surgery was successful, but the recovery was long and painful. I spent weeks in the hospital, surrounded by machines and strangers. It was during this time that I met Emily. She was my nurse, and from the moment I saw her, I knew there was something special about her. Her smile was like a ray of sunshine in the sterile, cold environment of the hospital. Every day, she would come in to check on me, and every day, I wished I could say more than just thank you. But how could I? I didn't speak a word of English, and she didn't speak my language. It was like we were two strangers trapped in a silent world, and I hated it. I had come to this country for treatment, hoping to find a cure for my illness. But in that moment I realized there was something else I needed to find: my voice. I wanted to tell her how much her kindness meant to me. I wanted to tell her how her smile made the long, painful days a little brighter. But all I could do was nod and smile back, hoping she understood what I couldn't say. That's when I made a decision. I was going to learn English, no matter how hard it was, no matter how long it took. I didn't have much time. My treatment was only supposed to last a few months. But I was determined. I didn't just want to speak English. I needed to. For her. For me. For the chance to finally say what I had been feeling all along. The first few days were a nightmare. I downloaded every language app one could find, but nothing seemed to work. I couldn't even remember the simplest words. Frustrated and desperate, I reached out to my old teacher back home. She agreed to help me, even though we were thousands of miles apart. We started with the basics: greetings, common phrases, and pronunciation. Every night, after my treatments, I would sit in my hospital room and practice for hours. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up. My body was weak from the treatments, and my mind was exhausted from trying to memorize new words. But every time I felt like quitting, I would think of Emily. I would imagine the look on her face when I finally said something more than "thank you." That thought kept me going. My teacher introduced me to new techniques. Watching English movies with subtitles, listening to songs and trying to understand the lyrics, and even keeping a journal where I wrote down my thoughts in English. At first, my sentences were full of mistakes, but I didn't care. I was learning, and that was all that mattered. One day I decided to take a risk. I had been practicing a simple sentence for weeks. "You have a beautiful smile." When Emily came into my room that morning, I took a deep breath and said it. Her eyes widened in surprise, and then she laughed, a soft, melodic sound that made my heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she said, her cheeks turning pink. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all day." That small victory gave me the confidence to keep going. I started practicing more complex sentences, asking her questions about her day, and even trying to make jokes. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And with every word I learned, I felt a little closer to her. The day I'll never forget was the day I finally told her how I felt. It was my last week in the hospital, and I knew I might never see her again. I had spent days rehearsing what I wanted to say, but when the moment came, my mind went blank. All I could do was look into her eyes and say, "Emily, I like you. A lot." She smiled, that same beautiful smile that had captured my heart from the beginning, and said, "I like you too." It wasn't a grand declaration of love, but it was enough. In that moment, I realized how far I had come. I had started this journey with nothing but a desire to connect with someone, and now I had found something I never expected: hope. Leaving the hospital was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't know if I would ever see Emily again, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to stop learning. English had given me a voice, and I wasn't going to let it go. As I boarded the plane back home, I opened my notebook and wrote down my next goal: keep learning, keep growing, and maybe, just maybe, find a way back to her. This isn't the end of my story. It's just the beginning. The first few days of learning the language felt like a nightmare. No matter how hard I tried to memorize simple words, my brain resisted. I couldn't even tell the difference between hello and goodbye. It felt like my mind was a tangled mess of wires, none of which were working properly. But I knew I couldn't give up. Not when Emily walked into my room every day with that kind smile of hers. My old teacher stepped in to help me from afar. She told me that learning a language is like building a house. You have to start with the foundation. Our first lesson was greetings. Every morning, before Emily entered my room, I would stand in front of the mirror and practice. "Hello, how are you?" I repeated it over and over until the words felt less foreign on my tongue. But it wasn't just about memorizing phrases. I had to train my ears to understand the rhythm of English, the way words flowed together in a sentence. I started listening to English songs, trying to pick out words I recognized. At first, it was just noise, but slowly I began to hear patterns. I would write down the lyrics and translate them word by word, even if it took me hours. One of the biggest challenges was pronunciation. My tongue just wouldn't cooperate with certain sounds. The th sound, for example, felt impossible. I remember practicing in front of Emily one day, trying to say "thank you." She smiled and gently corrected me, showing me how to place my tongue between my teeth. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to me. There were days when I felt like I was making no progress at all. I would forget words I had just learned or mix up tenses in the middle of a sentence. But my teacher kept reminding me, mistakes are part of the process. Every error is a step closer to getting it right. Emily became my unofficial language partner. She would patiently listen to me stumble through sentences, encouraging me to keep going. One day, I tried to tell her about my favorite book. It took me 5 minutes to string together a few broken sentences, but when I finally finished, she clapped and said, "That was amazing." Her encouragement fueled my determination. As the weeks went by, I started to notice small victories. I could understand more of what Emily said without needing her to repeat herself. I could order my own meals at the hospital cafeteria without pointing at the menu. And one day, I even made her laugh with a joke I had practiced for hours. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Learning English wasn't just about memorizing words and grammar rules. It was about breaking down walls between me and Emily, between me and the world. Every new word I learned felt like a key unlocking a door I didn't even know existed. But I knew this was just the beginning. There was still so much to learn, so many mistakes to make, and so many doors to unlock. And I was ready to face them all, one word at a time. As the days turned into weeks, Emily became more than just my nurse. She became my guide, my cheerleader, and my friend. She could see how hard I was trying to learn English, and one day she surprised me by saying, "I want to help you." Those 4 words filled me with a mix of gratitude and determination. I wasn't alone in this journey anymore. Emily started small. Every time she came into my room, she would greet me with a new phrase. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" she would say, and I would repeat after her, stumbling over the words but determined to get them right. She had this way of making even the most difficult sounds seem manageable. When I struggled with the sound in "thank you," she sat down with me and showed me how to place my tongue between my teeth. "Like this," she said, demonstrating slowly. It took me dozens of tries, but when I finally got it, her smile was worth every second of effort. One of the biggest challenges was understanding the rhythm of English. My native language had a completely different flow, and I often found myself pausing in the wrong places or stressing the wrong syllables. Emily noticed this and started speaking to me in short, clear sentences, emphasizing each word so I could hear the natural cadence. "Listen carefully," she would say, "and try to copy me." It was like learning a song, one note at a time. She also introduced me to the world of English music. "Music is a great way to learn," she told me one day, handing me a pair of headphones. "Listen to the lyrics and try to sing along." At first, it was overwhelming. The words came too fast, and I could barely keep up. But Emily encouraged me to start with slower songs, and soon I found myself humming along to melodies I had never heard before. One of my favorites was a song called "Perfect" by Ed Sheeran. The lyrics were simple but beautiful, and I practiced singing them until I could recite them by heart. Emily didn't just help me with speaking, she also encouraged me to write. "Writing is a great way to organize your thoughts," she said, handing me a small notebook. "Try writing a few sentences every day about how you're feeling or what you did." At first, my entries were short and full of mistakes. "Today I eat breakfast," I wrote one day. Emily gently corrected me. "Today I ate breakfast." She explained the difference between present and past tense, and slowly, my sentences started to improve. One of the most memorable moments was when Emily brought in a children's book. "This is one of my favorites," she said, handing me a copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. "It's simple, but it's a great way to practice." We read it together, with Emily patiently correcting my pronunciation and explaining new words. By the end of the book, I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in a long time. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were days when I felt like I was making no progress at all. I would forget words I had just learned or mix up tenses in the middle of a sentence. On one particularly frustrating day, I snapped at Emily, "Why is this so hard? I'll never get it right." She didn't get angry or defensive. Instead, she sat down next to me and said, "Learning a language is like climbing a mountain. It's tough, and sometimes you'll feel like giving up. But every step you take brings you closer to the top." Her words stayed with me, a reminder to keep going even when the path seemed impossible. As the weeks went by, I started to notice small victories. I could understand more of what Emily said without needing her to repeat herself. I could order my own meals at the hospital cafeteria without pointing at the menu. And one day, I even made her laugh with a joke I had practiced for hours. "Why did the Scarecrow win an award?" I asked her. She raised an eyebrow, curious. "Because he was outstanding in his field." Her laughter was the best reward I could have asked for. Emily's help went beyond just teaching me English. She gave me confidence, not just in my ability to learn a new language, but in myself. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself, and that made all the difference. But as my treatment neared its end, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. What would happen when I left the hospital? Would I ever see Emily again? And more importantly, would I be able to keep improving my English without her guidance? On my last day, Emily handed me a small gift, a dictionary and a note. "Keep learning," the note said. "You've come so far, and I know you can go even further. Don't give up." I hugged her tightly, trying to put all my gratitude into that one gesture. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling. "For everything." As I walked out of the hospital that day, I knew this wasn't the end of my journey. It was just the beginning. Emily had given me the tools I needed to keep going, and I was determined to make her proud. But deep down, I also knew there was one more thing I needed to do. I needed to find a way to tell her how much she meant to me, not just as a teacher, but as someone who had changed my life in ways I couldn't even put into words. And I knew that when the time came, I would be ready.